People loved my giving or a pledge sermon last year so much that, and I'm serious, that's not sarcastic, that many of you were saying to me, oh, just plug and play. Once I looked that up, because I'm getting old, I realized that means just do it again. I debated for a moment, but I knew, as ministers do, that it wouldn't work this year. Maybe next year. Though I do know that you love to say this, and I think it's why you loved the sermon. So let's just hear you say it. This is our church. Come on. This is our church. Yes. The theme of our campaign this year is strengthening sacred connections in our interconnected world. And the goal is $575,000. Thinking about this lets us remember that this campaign, because it goes from July 1st of 2024 until June 30th of 2025, will actually fund the first half of our 300th year anniversary. 300 years. It will fund those activities as well as many other exciting initiatives and building preservation needs, like a roof, as my daughter said to me the other night, lending her love and care to her mom. I was like, whoa, 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 crying about all kinds of stuff, and then I said, and then we have to put a new roof on. And she said, what? And I said, yeah, can you believe it? She's like, wow. But we do. We need a new roof. It's also going to help us ensure that we're able to hire our assistant minister, other open staff positions. Again, I hope that if you're interested or have questions, you come back here after some ice cream at noon in the sanctuary here, and you can hear all about it or ask your questions as well. I absolutely need to thank our campaign leadership team this year, who's been meeting since November to try to make this the most fun, inclusive, joyful, and easy campaign possible. So if you will just join me after I read their names in thanking our co-chairs Sue Creed and Ray Wilson, and members of the team including Tina Bennick, Bart Bracken, Vern Ellis, Lark Madden, John Mercer, Susan Ricker, Forrest Speck, Jim Supple, and staff members Diane Carroll, Cynthia Walsh, and myself. Can we just say thank you to all those people? These folks are being joined by 42 stewards, 42 of your members and friends. So when you receive the call or the email saying, would you like to have tea or coffee, or were you able to consider a pledge this year, please say yes. And above all, please answer their email. It takes bravery to be the people who say yes. We'll reach out to those 5, 6, or 7 people to get to know them better. We want this campaign and its results to strengthen our sacred connections, and it's so needed at this time in the world as we work to uphold democracy. Take a breath on that one. Offer spiritual worship services, community gatherings, programming, have wonderful and diverse music, care for our children and youth. I also need to thank our staff team, those who are departing and those who are remaining. Diane Carroll, Mara Flynn, Julie Parker Amory, Justin Murphy Mancini, Donnie Rogers, Cynthia Walsh, and our volunteer affiliate ministers, Reverend Stan Barrett and Jane Toohey. Can we thank them as well? When I think about our theme, strengthening sacred connections in our interconnected world, I think about reciprocity. The Society for U.S. Intellectual History defines reciprocity as this. It is an alchemy of reciprocal gifting. In other words, you receive a gift, you're grateful, and you give a gift, and that creates a bond. They go on to say that Robin Wall Kimmerer, who we have studied quite a bit and will continue to, gives this, and I'm quoting them, gives this a more systems science description. Reciprocity is when new arrangements are created Old ones are transformed by a joining of obligate symbiosis. Those are big words. A healthy spiritual community or city or family or any relationship embodies reciprocity. We give to one another and we receive from one another. We don't keep tally cards. We don't count. We don't think about, wait, who did this last? Have I given more than them? Because we know that life is seasons of life. There are times we need to receive much more, and there are times when we're able to give in all of those ways. We receive even as we give. Healthy and vibrant religious organizations, sadly, are on the fast decline in our country. The statistics are sobering, and I don't need to share them with you. Many of you send them to me regularly. Because you care. Because we know what a healthy spiritual community can be. And it matters to us when we see fewer and fewer people participating. Fortunately, it isn't true here, and that is because of you. It's because of us. You may or may not know that FRS is the 23rd largest Unitarian Universalist congregation in our country, and the second largest in New England. It's not to boast that I'm saying that, but to realize that what we are doing here matters. It matters for all of us and for the larger community, not only Newburyport, but all the surrounding towns and even into New Hampshire and Maine, the state of Massachusetts. It also matters for our Unitarian Universalist faith. I can't imagine a time more than now that our country and world needs healthy examples of spiritual communities who care for each other and the world. This fall, we held congregational insight workshops with 125 people participating that included parents in young church, staff, young adults, middle schoolers. The people who participated were well represented across the length of membership here, all the way from people who were not yet members to those who have been here for decades or even generations. All together, and this should not surprise you, you all generated 757 ideas. Yes, you did, because that's what you use too. We think we have ideas. But when we actually looked at them, and I need to thank Kathy Deslis and Rebecca and Andy Lobb, who worked tirelessly on the analysis of all of those ideas, we realized that 52% of those ideas had to do with these things: parish hall and what's going to happen, communications and planning, worship, and social justice and inclusion. When we add things like program features, environmental impact activities, and adult and youth programming, when we add those in, that represents 82% of the ideas. So though we may have slightly different expressions or particularities, there's actually a lot of common shared values and importance. As I read all of this data and the amazing analysis that was done, there were several key takeaways that I took away. I'll share them now and then invite you to come again on April 7th, when that's going to be the whole service and conversations afterwards. But were the key takeaways. And Rebecca validated this I did it from reading it and feeling it, and she said, and I checked you by the numbers, and you're right. So, first, we want better member engagement. That's with newer and older members and intergenerationally. We want to appeal to the unchurched, to get to know them, draw them in, change up the worship, have more rituals, more sacred time, and also more social justice. But mostly, change it some, not always. Diversify the music, include kids more in worship and all areas of church life, and support their families and caregivers. Engage with other churches, and finally, and top, use Parish Hall for the community at large, as well as our uses and needs, which speaks volumes to me. One of the many next steps will be asking people in the community, leaders and others, to come and share with us what they understand the community needs as far as space and resources. Last year, I talked about this being our church, and I want to extend that this year. It is our church. The question, though, is, who is our? Is it you and me? Those who are here and those who are not? Is it for young or old? Members of the LGBTQ community? Spiritual seekers? Environmental activists? Is it for people who are introverted and like to dress up? Or those who love a good party and come in ripped jeans? My friends, all of the above. We know that, and we're pretty good at it. We're not perfect, but we're pretty good. There are other ways to understand, however, how this is our church, and that's what I want to focus on for just a minute. Who that our is. I have two stories to share with you that exemplify this, and there are many, many others I could share. When I first came here, you told me you wanted a community minister. And what I learned quickly is you did not just want a community minister to look good. You wanted a minister who was part of the community because we are part of the community. As we started on our journey, our hike, as John Mercer wrote so eloquently, I wondered then in 2018 where we might be going, what we might grow into together. Growth is about so much more than numbers. It's about depth and breadth. FRS is so much more than a place people go to worship or learn. We're a beacon of liberal religion and a moral compass. And our neighbors and our area organizations confirm that. And there's something so meaningful when we show up places and when we are all part of this community. We hold memorial services for community members, many of whom have lived and worked here for decades, though they may never have been members of this church. Belonging here and having this be someone's church is so much more than the status of membership, or when a person last pledged, though those are important too, of course. But here are the two stories. One day, after no more than 2 months at my arrival, so we were talking about September 2018, a gentleman called me to schedule an appointment. He was sick, and he was looking for pastoral care. On the day of our appointment, he walked into my office. I can feel it and see it like it was this morning. He sat down, and I could tell he was ill. And he shared about his cancer diagnosis, how surprising it was for his family and how hard it was for them all to believe. How his adult children were stepping up and ensuring that all of his needs were being met, celebrating whatever remaining time they had together. He then shared how FRS had always been his church. He talked about his memorial service, what he wanted, how he couldn't imagine it being anywhere but here. He then shared his life story with me because he wanted me to know him before I officiated his service. We had a warm and a heart-rendering conversation that lasted a couple of hours. After he left, I went into our then membership coordinator's office, Diane Young, and I said to her, "Can you just look up this person's name? Because I wonder how long he's been a member here. It's obviously he has a deep connection." She goes, that name isn't familiar. And she looked it up, and she said, "He's never been a member here." This was his church. And I tell you, from his stories and his face and the feelings, this is his church. And we held a beautiful, beautiful service. both here and at a local graveyard. Belonging is a matter of the heart as much as anything else. When a person says this is their church, I believe them. My second story is from Reverend Jane Toohey, and I share this with her permission. Reverend Jane, our affiliate ministers as volunteers have other work they're doing in their lives. She is a chaplain at Anna Jake's Hospital. One day, not too very long ago, as she was making her rounds, visiting people who were sick or dying, a nurse came up to her and asked her if she would be willing to say a prayer with a patient who was asking for a chaplain. Reverend Jane replied, "Of course, yes." As she went to the other floor and approached that room, another nurse nearby alerted her that this patient was constrained to their bed. She didn't want her to be surprised. Reverend Jane entered the hospital room to find 2 police officers guarding the door. She began to speak to the man in the bed, his arms shackled to the bed. And he explained to her that he hadn't seen his wife or children for years, and he wasn't sure he would see them again before he died. He was returning to prison soon. He asked her if she would pray with him. Reverend Jane turned to the police officers and said, "Officers, we're about to pray. You may either join us or be quiet." After the prayers, the patient asked Reverend Jane what church she was from. She explained that she was with the First Religious Society in Newburyport, the big white church on Pleasant Street in Newburyport. She told me that his eyes lit up and he leaned forward as much as he could and said, "That's my church." She smiled and continued and asked more, and he said, "Yes, I went to recovery meetings there every week. That's my church." This is our church, and that our is much larger than we may ever realize. We are the privileged ones who get to know it day in and day out and be responsible to ensure it continues to be here. Stephen Wolf, you can get our little ones. They're going to come back. Our campaign goal again this year is $575,000. It's a 5% increase over last year. We've had people die, people moved away, other people's life circumstances have changed. I ask you from the bottom of my heart to consider your gift and see if you might give just a little more, or maybe even for the first time. You do not have to be a member to support this church. In fact, 15% of the people who offer us gifts each year at this time are not members. Every dollar counts, and I mean that. If a financial gift is simply not possible, but you want your name among the supporters, just whisper that in my ear, and I'll make the pledge for you from my minister's discretionary fund. You belong, we all belong. Membership, as I said, is so much more than a card, and we don't have cards anyway. We can reach this goal if each of us does what we genuinely can. I know Bart and I are increasing our pledge this year, and yes, we said a number of years now, that's it, no more. We can't, we simply can't. And then yesterday as I was walking Charlotte, he called and said, "So?" Because I know when it needs to be Bart to say, let's increase it again this year, because it matters. I'm asking for your help because I can't do this alone. We need a strong and appropriately sized staff, and I need each of you. This is our church, so join me in caring for our church. We're the lucky ones, I said, who have the privilege and responsibility to care for this beautiful space and our sacred connections so that our doors may be open to everyone who seeks a welcoming and safe place, doing what we can to strengthen sacred connections in our interconnected world together.